Hello and welcome. Today we're going to explore an object that's so common we probably don't even think about it much, the bell. But believe it or not, within that simple shape lies a really deep and resonant history, one that stretches back for thousands of years, all across the world. So what kind of story does it tell? Well, it's a story about incredible technological innovation, powerful spiritual beliefs, methods of civic control, and even soaring human ambition. So let's dive right in and find out how this simple bell has shaped the very soundscape of our world. So there's actually a formal study of bells, and it's called Campanology. That name comes from a region in Italy called Campania. And according to tradition, that's where bells were first introduced into Christian churches, way back around 400 AD. But our story actually begins long before that. We're not starting in Europe. Instead, we're going all the way back to Neolithic China to meet the bell's earliest ancestors. Now, if you look at this timeline, you'll see that the very first bells weren't even made of metal. They were actually small, baked clay rattles called jing, and they appeared almost 6,000 years ago. It then took another 2,000 years before the first bronze bells were cast. And from that point on, Chinese metallurgists developed these incredible, massive, suspended bells known as bo and zhong, which were used for ritual music. Okay, so here's something really interesting about these ancient Chinese bells: their unique acoustic engineering. You see, they were designed to produce two completely distinct musical notes from just a single bell. The first note is called the sui tone, and you get that by striking the bell right in the center of its broad face.
And then there's the second note, the ga tone. This one is produced by striking the bell on its side. Now, how was this even possible? Well, it's because the bells had an almond-shaped cross-section, which is very different from the circular bells we're used to in the West. This unique shape allowed for two different vibrational patterns. And honestly, that was a technological feat that just wasn't replicated anywhere else for a very long time. This amazing innovation was all made possible by a very distinct casting method. As we can see in this table, Chinese artisans used something called piece mold casting. This meant they reassembled sections of a clay mold. Doing it this way gave them incredibly precise control over the bell's wall thickness, and that was absolutely crucial for getting that two-tone effect. In contrast, the rest of the world was mostly using lost wax casting. Now, that method was better for creating fluid, organic shapes, but it offered much less precision when it came to acoustic tuning.
All right, let's shift gears a little. Now we're going to explore the bell's role as a powerful social tool, one that was used for protection, for command, and for control. Way back in the ancient Near East and in Rome, the sound of a bell was actually believed to have magical protective powers. For example, the Assyrians would attach bronze bells to their horse harnesses, and this wasn't just to keep track of the horses, it was meant to create a sonic barrier against evil spirits. This belief was also really strong in Rome, where a special kind of wind chime was used to guard the home. This Roman chime was called a tintinnabulum. And what made it so unique is that it combined the sound of bells with phallic symbols. Now, these symbols were considered a very powerful defense against the evil eye. So as the wind moved the chime, the sound and the motion were thought to distract and repel any bad luck, which would help ensure prosperity for the whole household. Moving into medieval Europe, the bell tower really became the central axis of civic life. It regulated the entire society with two very distinct signals. First, you had the curfew bell. This was a nightly rhythmic toll that ordered everyone to cover their fires and clear the streets. And then there was the tocsin. This was a frantic, irregular ringing that served as an emergency alarm. It would signal a fire or an approaching enemy, and it was a call for all citizens to spring into action. Okay, now let's shift our focus over to the East, because here the bell's function was much less about external control and a lot more about internal spiritual transformation. In Hinduism, for instance, the handbell, or ghanta, is absolutely essential to worship. Its physical form is deeply symbolic, and its sound is carefully engineered to help a devotee transition into a state of spiritual awareness. The ringing is believed to do a few things: to quiet the mind, to activate the body's energy centers, known as chakras, and to signal the presence of the divine. And in Japanese Buddhism, this spiritual role is embodied by the massive temple bell, called the Bonshō. Now, unlike Western bells, it doesn't have an internal clapper. Instead, it's struck from the outside with a large wooden beam. And this produces a deep, resonant hum that can last for a really long time. This sound is considered to be an audible expression of a core Buddhist concept, impermanence. The most significant ritual involving the Bonshō actually happens on New Year's Eve. It's a ceremony called Joya no Kain. During this ritual, the bell is struck exactly 108 times, and each one of those strikes is believed to purge one of the 108 earthly desires or sins that, according to Buddhist belief, are the cause of human suffering. So it's a way of purifying the community for the new year. All right, let's return to the West, where a very different tradition evolved. This was one that transformed bell ringing into a really unique blend of physical athletics and applied mathematics. So while most of continental Europe was focused on playing melodies, using stationary bells that were struck by hammers, which eventually led to the carillon, England developed a completely different system. It's called English change ringing, and it involves swinging bells in a full 360-degree circle. The focus here isn't on melody at all. It's all about ringing a series of complex mathematical patterns. So the crucial thing to understand here is that the ringers aren't playing a song. They're actually executing an algorithm. They start with a simple descending scale, which is called rounds. Then, by following a specific rule, the bells begin to change their order, just one place at a time. The ultimate goal is to ring through every single possible sequence or permutation of the bells without ever repeating a single one. Meanwhile, back in the Low Countries, that melodic tradition was being perfected with the invention of the carillon. This is a true musical instrument. It's played from a keyboard that's connected to at least 23 precisely tuned bells. And the big breakthrough came from the Harmony brothers. They were the first to figure out how to tune the very complex inner harmonics of a bell, and that's what allowed them to create such a pure musical tone. Okay, for our final section, we're going to look at the bell as a powerful symbol, a symbol of human achievement, of ambition, and sometimes of spectacular failure. Throughout history, rulers have loved to commission absolutely enormous bells as displays of their power. This table highlights just a few of these titans. You have the Great Bell of Damazzeti, which might have been the largest ever cast, but it was stolen and lost in a river. Then there's the Tsar Bell, the largest one still around today, but it cracked from thermal shock before it was ever even rung. And of course, the famous Liberty Bell, which cracked early in its life, all because of a brittle metal alloy. But the legacy of bells also includes immense tragedy. During the Second World War, the Nazi regime systematically confiscated about 175,000 bells from churches and town halls all across Europe. The bells were sorted by their historical value, but the vast majority were melted down for their copper and tin to be used in the war effort. This was so much more than just a seizure of resources. It was a deliberate act of cultural warfare designed to silence the very voice of these communities. This quote from a German deacon who was watching his church's bells being taken away just powerfully captures this sense of loss. His words turned out to be prophetic. You see, the language of the bell has constantly changed over time, shifting from magic to religion, from a civic timekeeper to a casualty of war. So, from a protective charm to a town clock, from a call to prayer to a casualty of war, it's clear the bell has had a long and incredibly varied journey. And all of this history brings us to a final question. In our modern, digital world, what language do the bells speak to us today?